sometimes we don't. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we don't. And her mother, she says she's lost control. Should surely seek help from a professional, someone to help her sleep. But I saw her crying, her tears were pouring, and although her life seems strangely frail, her face is weathered, she still glows. Oh my God, she still glows. Oh my God, oh my God, she still glows. But it's been some time since she's felt something for another, and God knows she knows. God knows she knows. She knows. God knows she knows. And although their life seems strangely frail, their face is weathered, they still glow. Oh my God, they still glow. Oh my God, oh my God, they still glow. Oh yeah, sometimes we bring the best out of each other, sometimes we don't.
We're throwing rocks at trees, running from breezes, messing around. Take me back a long time when I thought you'd be my girl. So much fun
me remember why I'll always love you. Even just once in a while, you show me your sweet side, 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 side. Do you remember when you called me up, taking my time again? You said you just wanna talk, but you start questioning everything. Even when I'm doing fine, you break me down and I just stay quiet. But all the while, I know that you got your sweet side. Let me see that smile, show me your sweet side. Help me remember why I'll always love you. Even just once in a while, you show me your sweet side. Your sweet, sweet side. Your sweet, sweet side. Your sweet, sweet side. Yeah. You got your sweet side. Let me see that smile, show me your sweet side. Help me remember why I'll always love you. Even just once in a while, you show me your sweet side. You got to show me. You got to.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm Ben from Universal Audio, and welcome back to yet another Office Hours. Happy Monday. Hope you guys all had a great weekend. This is a super exciting week here at UA. As you guys have no doubt heard, we've been teasing. There's a big launch happening tomorrow. I wish I could tell you guys. I wish I could just tell you guys right now exactly what it is, but that would be that'd ruin all the fun for everybody else. So we've got some amazing shows. Today we're going to be diving into some classic studio console workflows, kind of comparing Neve versus SSL versus API, and you're just kind of chatting about how that classic studio workflow can be emulated using Luna and UAD plugins. And then tomorrow, We're hanging out with Carlos de la Garza, mixing a Cold War Kids song inside of Luna. I don't know if I teased this last week, but I'm going to tease it right now because not only are we chatting with Carlos tomorrow, but the Luna session for the song that we're going to be breaking down tomorrow is also going to be available inside the app, along with some good new stuff. And then we follow that up with Wednesday, coming back and recording live with Shakir King and the band Moon Taxi. It's a huge week. I'm super pumped. We've got a lot of great shows coming up for you guys. And I just want to, again, give a huge shout out, all the intro music. I saw you guys in the chat loving the song there from Raquel. I was as well. I was over here, doing the bobble.
Bobblehead.
The bobble bend is back in full effect. And so guys, as always, we really we love showcasing music done by our community. So if you've got some tracks you'd like to see featured, hit us up live at uaudio.com to share your music. Hashtag Universal Audio on Instagram and Facebook to share your photos. And with that, let's get the show rocking and rolling. We've got Drew and Matt with us as usual. How you guys doing?
What's going on?
Doing good. Good to see you guys.
Good to see you guys too. The man, this is gonna be. I know you guys have got a lot of work on your plates this week as well with the launch week. But man, this is. I'm really excited for people to get their hands and ears on this new stuff that's coming out this week.
Yeah, this Luna session
is going to be a game changer.
It's fantastic. Yeah, it's fantastic. It's really great stuff to hear and get a peek behind the curtain and see what other people do. Those are always super fun.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'd be remiss if I didn't shout it out, guys, on the UAD store right now. The custom shop sale. Today is actually the last day of the custom shop sale. It's funny how those things just seem to line up, right? So the sale's ending tonight at midnight. If you've had your eye on any plugins or a custom bundle and you want to save a bunch of money on those, you guys know what to do. And of course, there's the Platinum Vocal promo still ongoing. If you buy a desktop Apollo, you can get some free plugins along with that. And I think that's all the promos and shout outs and stuff that we got to get across. I saw some really good questions happening there in the chat that I wanted to loop back up to real quick. I saw a bunch of great opinions in there asking about favorite Reverb plugins. Drew, what's you got a favorite Reverb plugin?
God, yeah. I mean, well, Capital Chambers is pretty hard to beat for just like density and front to back depth. I really love it. Even I like to use that one almost where it's not super audible, but like same with BX20. That also does it really good. Just this like pillowy, big, dense thing that makes your vocal just sound big and wide, but yet doesn't read as like super, effecty type reverb. So Capital Chambers and BX20 are really great for that. So those I'd throw those out there for everybody to check out.
Nice. Matt, what about you?
I think my Desert Island Reverb would be EMT 140. I think it's like super
You cannot
musical.
go wrong with that.
Yeah, it works on pretty much anything you throw it on. The B plate is just amazing. Second runner up would be Lexicon 480 though. If I want something a little more extreme, you can push it a little bit
and
further.
Versatility. Yeah, just tons of versatility there. Jeez.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I see a lot of shout outs here for the EMT. Man, for me, it's hard for me to ever do a mix without Ocean Way Studios. It's a room plugin.
Yeah.
It's not. You may not think of it as like a big reverb thing, but man, like that thing for adding dimension and space around a mix. That's 100% my go-to. That and then the EMT 250. Like I know the 140 that it's a hard one to beat out, but man, the 250 like there's something really cool about the way that one, the tails of that, just the touch of modulation, whatever it's doing to it, it's really special, man.
Yeah. You can't just have one. I mean,
No.
it's like, I mean, 2, 3, I mean, it really.
And if I'm stranded on a desert island, I'm probably not worrying about reverbs. I'm probably worrying a lot more about like food and water.
Coconuts, finding coconuts.
Exactly. Nice. Well, so guys, we wanted to do a little bit different of a show today, and as people already saw in the title too, we've got a great plugin deep dive planned for the end. We're going to talk about the AMS DFC plugin, one that's I think it's gotten literally no shine. There's very few, some people didn't even know it existed on the UA platform, but as we've been diving into it, we've learned so much. It's a super powerful plugin. The people that know, they know why it's kind of a classic and why it was worthy of becoming a UAD plugin. So we're going to dive into that a little bit later. But to start, we wanted to talk about these like classic studio console workflows, the kind of like, we lovingly call it like keeping it in the family, right? Like it's treating the idea here, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, Drew. Is basically kind of using a similar sound across your whole mix. So going like all Neve, for all of your channels, using like Neve summing, kind of using that Neve sound across almost everything in your mix, or just as likely like all SSL or all API.
Yeah.
What's the main benefit of doing something like that? Of kind of having a consistent tool just being used multiple times across a session?
Yeah, well, it's funny. The genesis of this show was, us three just chatting and talking about, different workflows and how people are using tools these days versus the past, and the idea came up, well, because a lot of people people think that it's sort of like it's this a virtue to be able to pick and choose all of your tools, and in some ways it is. I mean, we're blessed with so many options at our fingertips, but sometimes it makes me think back to like some of the classic records that we all love the sound of. Part of what made them what they are, right? Part of what made them have maybe a cohesiveness and a sort of, gel that pulled them all together was maybe that they were tracked through at the same studio through the same console, right? So every mic on the drum kit hit the same console pre, the bass had the same pre, and then of course you tracked through it. And then you also mixed on that same desk, right? All in the same. So the idea was, and this is something that, people, if you're just getting into it in the last 5-10 years, maybe even longer, it hasn't occurred to you that like people used to, and I remember doing this, several decades ago, people used to pick and choose the studio based on, speaking of Ocean Way, based on the rooms, right? Like, man, we got to get an Ocean Way to get that room sound. Of course, we now have the virtual versions of that, but the same thing was true with the consoles. So, I remember taking a 2-inch tape and going from studio to studio and playing the tape through the console and thinking, do we want to mix here? Or do we want to mix down the street at the API room? Or do we want to mix, down the room on the SSL?
Right. Like the
desk,
rooms became famous for the desk inside the room. Like there's the Neve room, and even like a major studio, such as Ocean Way, now United, you've got the Focusrite ISA console, Studio A. You've got the Neve over in Studio B. Like each room would have a different console available to it that would allow it to there we go. That it gives you unlocks a different sound, and also not just a different sound, but different workflows, right? Like as we've been exploring all these different channel strips, one of the things that's been really interesting to see is that like there's a different amount of control over the sound per channel strip, right? Like the API EQs, you're fixed 2 dB steps on the EQ, whereas on the SSL, you've got fully parametric stuff going on. Like it's things like that you also kind of back your mind, you're thinking, and then there's just that ingrained, the tone of each of those channels, like especially these old school analog consoles, every channel, there's transformers, there's op amps, there's discrete op amp, like there's so much circuitry that the signal travels through to finally come out through the speakers that it makes an impact on the sound. And that's what that's what a lot of people, us included, love about UAD plugins, is that it's that end-to-end emulation inside of each of these plugins. So throwing a Neve 1073 across your entire mix, it's roughly equivalent to running your whole multi-track out through a Neve console, right?
Yeah. And then when you combine it with the summing algorithms that we have, the Neve and the API, that's kind of, I think people have asked us in the past, why haven't you done console emulation? It's because it's, it's not a plugin, right? It needs to be, kind of integrated. So channel strips go on channels and they emulate the channel strip. And then, the summing, the action of the summing amps, go on buses in the main out. And it's, some people, it's surprising how sometimes subtle it is, I hear from users every day that the API summing is a touch on the subtle side. And yeah, it is. And it actually kind of like, I always encourage users almost on a daily basis, like, don't be afraid to push that one, like that one starts to sound better the more you push it. The Neve is certainly highly colored right out of the gate. So the sonics, it's subtle and it's cumulative. But it's unmistakable, that's part of the equation. And then there's a whole nother side of this, right? That we can also talk about. And that is sort of the functionality and the direction, that the console designer sort of takes you on,
Totally.
They,
And
they
that's-
actually steer you, you know?
exactly, right? And I'm sure you guys in the chat, you're probably curious. When we talk about the sonic stuff, we're gonna at the end of we're gonna talk about this a little bit. We've got a few more points we want to cover, but then we're gonna actually jump in and listen to some of these differences as well. Drew put together a demo where we'll be able to hear these different console emulations and this sort of workflow being recreated inside of Luna. We're going to kind of demo a few different versions so you guys can really pick up on how, you know, some of this stuff is subtle, but some of this stuff is also really obvious. So it's going to be, and, you know, but beyond just the electronics and the emulations there, right? I think what you're kind of referring to here, Drew, right, is the creative limitations, right? These, it's not so much like you have your hands tied, but it's more like you have an opportunity to kind of focus on what matters. When you're working on certain desks, especially like you know, again, we'll take like the API for instance, right? You set the gain how you like it. Oh, this needs to be a little bit brighter. Great, you just brighten up the EQ a little bit. You know, I want a little bit of dynamic control. Switch in the compressor. Like it's having these things just in line, ready to go. That speeds up your workflow especially when you're in a big tracking session, right? You're working with a band. They're all on the other side of the glass. They're paying a lot of money per hour to be in this room. They want to go. They want to like stay in the moment. And as an engineer and producer, your goal is to keep up with the creativity that's happening on the other side of the glass.
Yeah, and if every channel's the same, you know, if every channel's the same, your muscle memory, you know, you intuitively go to the knobs and you move over to the next channel and the knobs are in the same position. So you're kind of like, you know, there's a certain amount of muscle memory, familiarity, and speed of use, you know, ease of use and speed that allow you to kind of jump around. And it's one of the things that matters, you know, that's super helpful about working on consoles.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I've talked about this too with you know, with our friends like Jakir, you know, asking them like, why do you pick one preamp over another? Right? This is a common question I see people at. Why would you pick up the 1073 over the SSL or over the Vision channel strip? Like, why would you pick one over the other? A lot of times they go because it's what's familiar to me. It's something I just know. I know it in an instant. I kind of know how it's going to color the sound, but more importantly, it's just something I know and I can trust. And you know, Fab's said this many times, like especially when you're working fast or you're working remotely or you're in these like high pressure situations, you're not going to sit there like being 5 different preamps trying to figure out exactly which one. No. You're gonna grab the Neve 1073 or something that you're intimately familiar with, and you can just go, yep, sounds good. Let's keep moving. Let's get the session rolling.
Yeah, and you know, bringing up a drum kit on a desk, it's like, you know, they're all the same, and you're just like it's like a boom, boom, boom. You know, you got a drummer playing, and you've got limited time, and you just want to, you know, go fast and get things pulled up quick and get good sounds quickly. That's the kind of stuff that makes people, you know, want to work with you. You know what I mean? Like when you can just sort of, you know, when you're just sort of the chief of the session, you can get things happening fast. And so this is all part of that same similar workflow.
Mm-hmm. Well, I found myself too, like I end up, it kind of allows me to, especially if you just kind of set a decision, right? If you just say like, cool, I'm committing to the SSL sound for this session. That's, you know, in the back of my mind, I've got like this record I want to kind of sound like these sorts of records. I want to have this like kind of modern East Coast, West Coast, like I want to have this kind of really transparent thing. I don't need a heavy Neve color. I don't need an API color. Cool, I'm going to commit to doing the SSL thing. Then I stopped thinking about it. I stopped kind of exploring all my avenues, and then you start focusing on things like mic choice, mic placement, on, you know, the arrangement with the musicians. It kind of lets you take that engineer hat off and stop thinking about all of your hundreds of possibilities, and you're like, cool, set and forget. Let's focus on what actually matters here. And Drew, I know you made a great note in here too of like, you know, there's some of these, especially say something like the 1073, having like these fixed frequencies. There's a reason why they pick those frequencies, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's you know, some people look at these, like, you know, you mentioned creative limitations. It's like some of these semi-parametric EQs that have these, you know, that aren't the API plus or minus 2 dB at a time. You know, people, it's like, well, you know, make big chunky decisions, you know, and then move on, you know, and react to them in real time. And same with something like a 1073, where, you know, essentially what you have when you're using a 1073 is you have Rupert Neve sitting next to you, right? He's in spirit sitting next to you. And he's telling you, hey, on the bottom end, right? You know, you've got, I've given you 4 choices, right? Two for the kick, right? 35 and 60, and then oh, guess what? 110, that's your bass guitar, and then 220, oh, there's your snare bottom end. So it's in a manner of speaking, he's sitting next to you, guiding you. Same with API. Saul Walker designed the 550 EQ like in 1968 or something, and there's a lot of stuff packed into that high, bandpass filter, peaks and shelves, and then another mid-peaking type. Again, all of those frequencies, like, I don't know about you, Ben and Matt, but like for me, like those API frequencies are perfect. Like, 400, 500, 700, these are all like the frequencies that like there's stuff I'm reaching for every day on almost anything, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then low pass, high pass filter. Like guys, it's really cool. It is really interesting to reflect that like these aren't just by convenience, right? It wasn't 220 is the easy circuit to make. No, like these guys spent their R&D went into making these as musical devices as they possibly could, and they weren't throwing darts at the dartboard just trying to figure out what frequency we should put on the front panel. No, it was like they sat there and tuned these with musicians, with engineers, and figured out what sounds best, what works best, what allows people to do what they're looking to do musically with these devices. It comes through, and again, I just can't stress this enough, like how much of an impact this will make to your recordings and to your productions by kind of following this advice and following where the tools are leading you, and then letting them get out of the way. Because like we spend all these shows geeking out about hardware and software, right? Like we're here just kind of we all love these tools and we love to like explore what's possible with each one of them. But I always come back to like, man, it's the music that you make with these tools that ends up mattering. Like the listeners on the other side and their earbuds will not give one iota if you use API or Neve. They don't care. They don't hear that. But what this does impact is it does impact how the session feels, how it comes through on the headphones for the musicians. Are they inspired to perform? Well, do they want to do one more take because they want to just take it one step further? Do they want to overdrive it to just give it more energy? Like these things can have a subtle influence in the music, and that's ultimately what ends up mattering the most.
Yeah, for sure. But even on the, even to circle back on the technical side, you were saying, Ben, about like taking your producer hat off or putting your engineer hat off and putting on your producer hat. When you look at it in the reverse, one of the things that I always tell people about when it comes to committing, a lot of people are afraid to commit. Even Unison, Unison preamps are pretty subtle, right? I've shot out a lot of things and worked on a lot of consoles, and make no mistake, preamps they're pretty subtle. We tend to blow things up and say, oh, it's a huge difference, but it's a huge difference to us in that moment because it gets us that one little 3% extra. But in the grand scheme of things, they're relatively simple. But even when you talk about Unison or even just a little bit of high passing or a little bit of basic compression, one of the things that's important that people might not have thought about is that in that moment, right? In that moment, while you're getting the sound, then and only then can you go out and move the mic. Then and only then can you change the mic, right? And then and only then can you move somebody out of the corner because you notice that there's a little bass buildup there, and that as you add a little compression, that bass buildup starts to come into play. So there's a lot of there's a lot of sort of detail behind committing and at least trying to get a sound in that moment. You might choose a Neve pre, and then that'll cause you to change the mic, or move the mic. Especially proximity effect, we get a lot of buildup. We close mic a lot of things, and then if we don't high pass it in that moment, then we get a lot of bass buildup in our multi tracks, and you have to wind up doing a bunch of high pass. And whereas maybe this is one of the things I love about Fab's technique is he knows that stuff, and he's I've seen him many times, having Lewis back off, it's like, that's like, he wants to get some air and he wants to get some, life into that vocal, because proximity effect can build up and sound a little stuffy, So anyway, just.
Well, and something to think about here, Matt, you reminded me of, that we have a great article over on our blog, how the pros choose mic preamps.
Yeah,
very, very, very
article.
relevant to what we're talking about here today. If you guys haven't already seen this article, I think we've included it in some of our 5-minute tip emails. It came out a couple of years ago, but we kind of asked Guru and Joe Ciccarelli and Hamilton, asked them for their opinions on how do you choose preamps, how do you distinguish the preamp color from one to another. And so it's a fascinating article. I think we'll drop the link here in the chat if you guys haven't already checked this one out. But it's really interesting to kind of see how some professional Grammy-winning engineers also approach this the same exact question. So guys, we can sit here and obviously we could chat about this hours on it. We already have chatted about this for
Yeah.
hours on it. But what would be really great to do is actually let's start hearing some of this stuff. And Drew, like I mentioned, I teased you've got a bit of an example here that we can share with folks about these different sounds, because I know us here on the call, like we're very, very familiar with these tools because we use them day in, day out. But for someone that's trying to learn the sound of these things, that can be it can feel intimidating, especially as you're training your ear to kind of learn the signatures, the characteristics of each of these kind of the major food groups, if you will, of preamps and channel strips. What distinguishes one to another. It's stuff like this. It's doing experiments like this that kind of help you start to really codify what you get when you use a Neve versus an SSL, or what you get when you use an API versus a 610, like stuff like that. So what's kind of your recommendation to help people learn these sounds and really kind of get that database built in their mind?
Yeah, that's a great setup, because that's exactly what, doing these, like, this is not something that experienced engineers think about on a day-to-day basis. And so working up these exercises was super interesting and illuminating for me, because I actually had to, I was investigating and digging deeper into things that were just intuitive, that over the years that I would just go for. And that database for Mark that database term is great, because that's what you're doing as you're learning to mix and produce and engineer, is you're constantly building up a database of oh, I tried that, didn't work, but now I know what it did do, and now I'm going to move to the next tool and so forth. So this was super interesting to me. Because things weren't always exactly as I had thought, so for example, here's my API, this is my API example, and we can talk a little bit about this. So here's what I just to give you just to do the setup on this appropriate. I tried to keep this simple. I kept the vocal out of the equation because it already had a pretty complex chain, and I didn't want to mess with that too much. So what I did was I took drums, bass, and some rhythm guitar tracks, and I had a basic mix. This is purely for this example. It's not sort of dialed in as a real final mix, but it was me just investigating. So if you start with the API, you've got, first of all, it has this unique gain structure, unlike others. In some of the channel strips that we've done in the past, you could choose between line or mic. And in this, on the Vision channel strip here, it's, just a gain stage that you can, that's very, so it encourages you to push it, right? It encourages you to play with it and have different, and hear what it's going to do sonically. Unlike an SSL channel where if you're coming in the line or you switch to mic, it's kind of either or kind of a thing. This is a little bit more fluid and nice. So in some of these cases, I pushed things in with the gain knob, and in other cases I didn't, and then of course we have the 215L, great band passing, which in this case is a kick drum. And surprisingly, on this particular example, I was high passing the kick, just using my ears and trying not to look too hard at the numbers, which these devices promote, so I wound up going up a little higher than I would have expected in this case. And then from there, I don't think I don't have the gate on this kick drum. And then the compressor here, this is something you definitely want to spend some time with, because, both API and SSL offer auto makeup gain, right? So you'll notice that there's no output control. There's no makeup gain knob. So the processor is doing it for you. But if you play around with these, you'll see that they behave very differently. SSL's makeup gain more aggressive, API's a little more subtle. So you definitely want to play around with that and see how things are going to react. Of course, attack time is just fast, slow, and medium, right? So you're not turning a knob and trying to. You basically have one of three choices. So it's just like play around with the knob and get it where you want it to go. The knee, we got hard versus soft. In this case, I was using hard because I want, this is a kick drum and I want to add some punch. So the hard knees, generally speaking, are more audible. And you'll see later in the show when we do the DFC, DFC, like other dynamics processors that have a transfer curve, there's some visualness that you can have. But here you're just kind of going with your ears. And then the new versus the old here, our new is the feed forward design. It's more aggressive. And old uses a feedback design, which you can Google that stuff. We don't need to spend a bunch of time on it, but it basically is a more gentle, softer style of compression. So I went with new this time.
Well, and the cool thing,
And,
right,
yeah.
so what I'd love to know, Drew, is like, so as you were making these examples, did you kind of did you approach each time you went through it with each different flavor? Did you start from scratch, or did you kind of have like, oh, on the last one I did this, so I'm going to kind of duplicate similar, because obviously you can't do exactly the same EQ or dynamics moves, but you could do kind of similar ones. Were you kind of taking notes from one to another to try to make them about the same, or were you just listening and making your decisions based on what you heard?
Yeah, I wound up, I mostly the latter, almost exclusively the latter, because what I realized very quickly in bringing up what I realized was that like it was fruitless to try and match settings, right? Like, this is, which the big lesson to me for here, and what I hope people is that you need to go do this, right? You need to go play around with this. Because it totally, I reacted so differently based on the channel. It was crazy. I couldn't believe how, my mind went totally different. For example, like this one here, like I'm plowing out, like as much 500 as I can. I'm sorry, as much 160 or 180 here as I can. In this thing, and like in another one, I was somewhere else. You know what I mean? Like in another channel strip with another session, it just felt different, and so I wound up doing a different thing. And
man,
it was interesting.
I love, like, Drew. I got to reiterate that point, because this is like the tools informing what happens, right? It's like, and also, guys, you're never gonna hear the sound the same way twice, right? This is like, I've talked about this with Fab a bunch of times too, where it's just like, man, this is the mix as it is today. And especially every time we've done tutorials or done, live streams and stuff, like what you guys see them doing in the moment in those videos is what they felt that day through those speakers, and with what they had for breakfast that morning, and where the moon was. Like, all of these things, like, as funny as it is, it'll never be the same way twice. Even if you use the same tool twice, you probably are going to react differently based on just, it's typically, for me, it's what I had for breakfast determines how I EQ things.
The weather.
The weather, all these factors.
How much wax you have in your ear that day.
Everything matters, but most importantly is that you never do the same thing twice. But what you end up doing by doing exercises like this, and you guys should think about this kind of like an exercise. This is something you can try on your own. Is trying, with the plugins that you own, or with ones that you don't own. With the UAD stuff, you always get 14-day free trials for every single plugin. And by the way, I'm gonna drop a little, now we're like a little bit in the show. We've got our dedicated, we're all good friends here. Along with tomorrow's software launch, we're doing a demo reset for everybody. Every UAD demo that if you've used up any of your 14-day demos, they're gonna all reset. So if there's any plugins that you tried once, didn't quite, get enough time with it, you're going to be able to reset it tomorrow. This is, you guys heard it here first. This is that's as much as I can leak. All right, I'm done leaking. But it makes doing this exercise, and I've done this myself. This is how, whenever I get a new plugin, this is how I sit there and evaluate. I shoot it out against things that I know, and I A/B between the two, and really start to learn, like, man, how do I like the mid range of this EQ versus the mid range of this Pultec that I know very, very familiar, right? You take a familiar thing and an unfamiliar thing, and you kind of hear them side by side. What does this do differently from this? And we talk about the database. Like, this is how you build that up. You got to take something, a known quantity, and then inject an unknown one, and compare between the two, and really get comfortable with what does this mid-range feel like? What does this top end feel like? Does it do what I expected? Or is it, oh wow, this reaches a little bit further than the other one? Like, all these things, it's, as much as you can listen to folks like us or professionals, people sharing their knowledge, there's some of the stuff that you just got to do on your own. You got to get in there and get hands-on and use your ears and your own environment to really evaluate these things, because it also comes down to like a personal preference, right? Like, some people just, me personally, I use SSL stuff on almost every one of my mixes. I use it more than I use the Neve stuff, because that's the tool that just resonates with the type of music I like to make, and also the results that I can get quickly with the SSL e-channel strip over, say, like a 1073, which is, I'll still pull it out for certain things when I know that I need that sound, but it's not necessarily my go-to like it is with the SSL.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ben, too, because some people might be thinking, well, gosh, these guys are talking a lot. Why don't we listen? But that's not the point of this is not, you please don't go and just put the channel strips across each track and then sort of try and do some quick A/B. That's not what this is about, because the sonic imprints are subtle and meaningful, but it's more about this holistic big picture thing. So what we're doing here is trying to just give you some concepts to be thinking about as you go into your own sessions and do this stuff, because that's where you're gonna. It's like Ben said, it's sort of a palpable. It's a feel thing. And it's a palpable thing. And it's a responsiveness thing where as you turn the knob, as you do something, something's either coming back and giving back to you, and you're sort of, you get perked up and you get a little smile on your face, or you're like, this is not quite doing it for me, and then you'll switch out the tool. So this is really an exercise that you need to do yourself. Like, we can't tell you, which one you're going to prefer or which one's going to work in any given moment. So
yeah. Nice. Well,
anyway,
man, we're getting some amazing questions and comments, and we're gonna keep moving forward. But I do want to highlight a couple of these. One I brought up there on air, saying humidity and temperature does actually affect how sound travels through air.
That's
correct.
True.
Yep, that is true. You're not wrong there, Todd. Got a good question. Salama's asking, do we use the same plug-in chain on an entire record? If you're doing, say, like an album, or would you change it to match the mood of each song? Drew, what's your approach to that?
Well, yeah. So like, this is, one of the things that an exercise like this will teach you is it will really allow you to hone in on what those subtle differences are between them. And then moving forward, you can choose, there might be instances where you want to choose the same thing across all of the channels for that cohesion, for that speed of workflow, for that, trusting the sonics of that given sort of platform, so to speak. But you also now have a heightened awareness of what these tools do otherwise, because you'll find that maybe API doesn't work on this, or maybe Neve doesn't work on that. So now when you do swap things out, you're swapping them out with some intention, right? So to use your term, Ben, with some thought behind it, right? So now you're like, now I know I want. One of the things I noticed here was that the SSL stuff was easier to get like punch, right? And almost like in some instances almost too much. I was like, whoa, I got to back off compared to having just played around with the API, which is its auto makeup gain structure is different and feels different and reacts different. So I think it's like an exercise like this is really great in just informing your entire sort of workflow and really will help you solidify where you gravitate towards and what your tools are,
Mm-hmm. There's another great question, and you guys, we've been talking a lot about channel strips here so far, but Larry asked a great question. Drew, did you use the same tape types for all of these? Because, man, this is another way, if we're talking about classic, studio console workflows, right? That's another one where, like, think about how this would actually happen in a studio, right? You'd probably have one 24-track machine. If you're super lucky, if you're Michael Jackson, you have multiple. But for most folks, you'd have one 24-track machine, one type of tape, one type of head, and you have, again, that creates consistency across your tracks. So all of them having the same. And it looks like in this case you're using the Studer A800.
Yeah.
Sharing those settings and sharing that tone, that kind of that print, that little bit of saturation, the bit of color that the tape is adding across multiple tracks, across your entire mix. It does have a cohesive effect, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, these tape machines, the fact that we have 4 slots is amazing. I mean, it's the equivalent of having 4 24 tracks synchronized up and being able to pick and choose which tracks are on there and have different tape types and all that stuff. So yeah, the sonic, this is, I personally, in this particular example, I did not change the tape because I was trying to isolate for the channel strip a bit. Mm-hmm. So I didn't in this case, but in an upcoming show, we plan on doing a tape show. And so there, I think we'll be doing, stay tuned for that, because I think we'll be doing a similar sort of concept and deep dive on the tape side. But it's definitely something that I do in real mixes, for sure. Being able to have one for the drums and one for other stuff, and then, some specialized tapes out on the edges. Yeah, for sure.
Nice. Well, man, all right, we've been geeking hard enough. So let's hear some examples, and then we'll jump over into our plugin deep dive. But again, we can't stress this enough, guys. This is a great take what we're showing you guys here today and try this out on your own tracks. Try, if you don't have tracks to try it on, download any of the Luna sessions that are available inside the app. You can go. That's incredible material, super well recorded, lots of different genres of music, so you can explore what we're talking about. You can, of course, those we like to give you guys kind of the final mixes of those. Save a new version, create your own thing, and try what we're showing you guys here today of experimenting with these different flavors of classic studio consoles, and see if you guys react the same way that Drew's reacting here to this mix.
Yeah. So this one, the first one I'm going to play is the API. And again, this is not meant to be, in fact, I have them in session versions. So they'll be, I'm going to be able to I'll switch to them with a little bit of a break in between. So the idea is not, it's more to just absorb like the feel of the different channel strips and so forth. So let's give this one a listen. All right, so that's our API.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go to the SSL one now. I did these as versions.
We're gonna stay calm and quiet here, guys. Try to hold what that API sounded like in your head. Just, meditate on that sound. Now this is the SSL version of the same thing.
Alrighty. Oh, yep. Sorry. Let me go from the same spot.
Let's hear the third. Let's hear the Neve one, and then we're gonna talk, and I'm gonna ask you guys, all you guys in the chat, a question.
So now this one's a little different. This one requires a tiny bit of explanation in the sense that I chose 1084, and of course 1084 doesn't have dynamics processors. So what I did instead was so I married up the 2254 with it. So just a little bit of insight there on what the concept was. But here's that one. Thicker.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right, everyone in the chat. I see you guys are already kind of commenting in there. I'm not going to ask which one was your favorite. That's irrelevant.
Yeah, it is irrelevant. Yep.
Tell me, you guys, what are you hearing as the differences? Where do you notice the difference? There's a lot going on. Obviously, we've got drums, guitar, bass, we've got a lot of stuff all happening in the mix at the same time. But to your guys' ear, what were you hearing? What were the major differences? Where did you really find? Oh, I heard as soon as you put the SSL, I heard this, or vice versa. I'd love to see you guys in the comments what you guys are coming up with. And then while they're doing that, Drew, what were the biggest sonic differences between those three? What's your feedback?
You know what? I hate to say this because it sounds so cliche, but it kind of reinforced sort of the quote unquote common wisdom. Like even there, like the Neve is like thicker bottom end. I mean, like it just felt that way to me. API is super smooth and silky and like and has that sort of again, I don't want to sound cliche, but that sort of mid forward little presence. And then SSL like punchy and kind of like and I'll tell you that these settings are nowhere near each other. Like it was all reactive. As I was doing this, everything caused me to react differently to each one. And all three of them are great mixes, like could be great mixes, have the potential to deliver great mixes. But it's like it was cool and it was interesting to do. And so I mean I kind of fell in line with the conventional wisdom. I don't know what you guys are hearing or what people are saying.
Yeah, but how about you, Matt?
Fiddle Me This Studios just nailed it on the head. API was punchy but darker than SSL. SSL is a little airier and shinier, a little brighter, and Neve is meatier. But that's exactly what I heard too. The SSL just kind of add a little bit top end sheen to it, and then the Neve had that thick, nice, powerful bottom end for sure.
Yeah. And it's funny. I'm actually hearing them with a little space between them now. So like I'm hearing them a little sort of fresh right now, which was cool to be able to hear them back to back like that.
And I got me and Paul agree. The SSL one, holy crap! Like that, it was probably, to me, it was the one that stood out as the most different between the three. Like, but the kind of the smoothness in there, it felt like the most polished, I guess, out of the three. Like the Neve one had a little bit more of a raw edge to it. The API had this kind of brighter edge to it, which I really liked. Like,
Yeah.
and I hope you guys are all agreeing with me. Like none of those sounded bad. Like all of them sound good in their own way, just different, right? Like this is the, and if you ever see someone saying one thing sounds bad over another, you just immediately stop listening to them, because nothing,
100%.
none of these sound bad. They all sound good in their own way. It just kind of, what matters more is like, is this the vision? Is this the sonic vision that you have for this mix? That's all. That's all that matters, man. And it's, doing the, and I see some people are kind of wondering, hey, could we print in, like do a quick A/B? Yeah, we could, but guys, the thing here is you want to start building up these. We want this. We want you guys to go try this stuff for yourself. Do this in your own sessions.
Your mix. Yeah,
do this with your own mixes.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, if you don't have sessions to do this on, grab some of the Luna sessions that are available for download. This is such a great learning opportunity. Like book yourself a session to hang out and try out what we just demonstrated here. Of like, and as Drew,
and if you don't own some of these plugins, tomorrow you're going to have 14 days to try them out. So you have all the chance in the world to try out everything tomorrow.
Well, there's a really good Prince noticed this as well. The vocals sounded different, and as you mentioned, Drew, the one thing that you didn't do is the vocals stayed the same. The vocal chain in all three of those mixes was identical. So
that's
Prince,
that's
Prince,
savvy.
what you
that's
noticed,
savvy, Prince.
It was like you nailed it, man. Changing all the things around the vocal changed how you perceive that vocal. Yes, exactly that, man.
Yeah, it totally changed how it sits in the mix with the other instrumentation. You can totally hear
Great
that.
observation.
The Neve's got kind of like a woolliness. It's got some meat. It's got a little bit more heft. And again, guys, this doesn't always just come down to the inherent nature of these plugins. What this comes down to is how Drew reacted to these having these and listening to it. And generally they all sounded in the same universe, right? It's the same production, the raw sounds, the tape machine. There's a lot of consistency here, but still he had the
stereo
opportunity.
bus. Yeah, same two bus. Yeah.
But you still had the opportunity to reapproach the saturation and the EQ and maybe even the dynamics on them. And yeah, guys, it's such an exciting thing to try out, and it's such a to me, like this is the real fun of kind of learning how to mix and getting familiar with these tools and really starting to understand, like, oh, this is when I use this one I get this result, and then when I use the Neve I get this result, when I use the SSL I get this, and that's that database, man. Like, that's that knowledge that you can absorb. And then when you're in a session, you don't have to sit there and A/B 5 different plugins while you're on the client's time, right? Like this is the thing we alluded to earlier of like, why do you go to a big studio? Because it's all kind of determined for you. Like, we're gonna go make this record. It's on Neve console. It's gonna sound sick, and you just go. You've made that call. You've talked to the band. You kind of understand what sonic direction you want to go for. You made a decision, and you stop thinking about it because there's so many other things to think about once you're really at go time.
Yeah.
Paul had a great comment or a great question in the chat. Would you use different channel shifts for different genres of music, like SSL for dance or pop and Neve for rock? And I personally, that would kind of inform my starting point. I would typically do SSL for some more electronic, something a little to show off the high end and make it a little bit brighter. Neve is like the classic choice for rock, but I think it's important not to get kind of pigeonholed into those ideas, because that's the beauty of having all these flavors right at your fingertips, is you can really apply something that was maybe traditionally used for rock to like an electronic song and get a whole different flavor. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that if anything, doing this exercise will allow you to make those decisions, on a case by case basis. I always think of audio as being just a yin and yang thing, where you hear something and then you react to that. It's equal but opposite. If the sound coming out of the speakers is spiky and thin and I need to round it out, then I'm going to reach for a certain tool. If something's already fat and maybe a little muddy, I'm going to reach for a different tool. So like this will really build up your database, as Ben's been saying, which is a word I use all the time myself. But that allows you to do that. So
we'll have a mutiny on our hands if we don't do it. Can we listen to all 3 one more time? Like,
okay.
Everyone. I know we want to move on to this DFC deep dive, but
okay.
I'm with you guys. Let's go through and let's do. Do you want to do reverse order since we already have the Neve up?
Yeah, I'm on the Neve, so let's do the Neve.
And
was that about the right length? Was that about a good length through that chorus? I guess.
To me, that felt like a good length.
Okay, yeah, cool,
And
awesome.
actually, let's do Neve API SSL this time, so that way we can get a slightly different order to it. So all right, and this time you guys use your ears, close your eyes, use your memory, try to really listen to the. For me, it's like the drums, bass, guitar. Those are your main differences, but then pay attention too to how that vocal. Knowing now that the mix bus, the vocal treatment, all those things are being held consistent, and the mix is changing around them. Pay attention to how that vocal feels differently, surrounded by different channel strips full of the rest of the mix. So this is the Neve one to start with.
Here comes the Neve.
You've got a taste for the bad, for the bold, for the wicked. And every time that you push on a door, you're a witness to feel this so damn good. You want it bad. You want it bad.
I think that's where I went before. So what was it? API next?
Yep.
Okay.
You've got a taste for the bad, for the bold, for the wicked. And every time that you push on a door, you're a witness to feel this so damn good. You want it bad. You want it bad.
Alrighty. And last was SSL, right?
Yep.
Okay.
You've got a taste for the bad, for the bold, for the wicked. And every time that you push on a door, you're a witness to feel this so damn good. You want it bad. You want it bad.
All right. It's a question for a chat. Did any of you guys, now we listened to them in a different order and, with as minimal talking between as possible, did it change your opinions at all about it? As I'll raise my hand right away. The API and the Neve were so much closer sonically, I felt this time. Again, last time they were separated by the SSL. This time hearing them side by side, they both sound like they shared the thickness. But then it really made me notice what I loved about the SSL mix, which was the kick and the bass tone in that one. To me, it felt like they punched through a little bit clearer. Like the guitars were a little bit less in that low mid kind of area. How about you guys, Drew or Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much had the same experience, and I like that order because with the Neve you could really hear the bottom, and then it kind of moved into the more mid-range forward sound with the API, and then when you moved in the SSL, you could really hear the sheen and the clarity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting for me because one of the things that oops, that's not the one I wanted. I wanted the anyway, one of the things that was interesting to me in doing it was that that we alluded to earlier is like I chose different things. I chose different things on the.
Did your Neve state get messed up?
I don't know. Maybe I did. But I chose different things based on the channels. Like, so for Neve, like for me, like that 220 band. Yeah, it looks like it did. The 220 band on the Neve is something that like when I'm on an API or an SSL, I don't gravitate towards that. But yet on that when I'm dealing with 1084s, I tend to. You know what I mean?
Oh man, there's so many good comments. You guys, I love the comment section today. You guys are awesome. Greggy's saying, they all sound great. The SSL kept my attention for the vocals and the bass line was there where I'd like it. And yeah, that's what I was hearing. But Phil to me said SSL on the band made the vocal effects stand out more. Yep. Asher's saying, I love the Neve. Adds just that sparkle. Neve sounds better, especially in the drums. This is exactly what we wanted. We wanted to create division and no, but you guys are picking up exactly what we're putting down. There's a huge component of personal preference to this stuff, right? There's like what feels good to your ears, what feels good to your ear that may be different than someone else's. And ultimately what matters is what feels good to you, what feels good to your clients, to the artists that you're working with, what gets them excited about their mixes and about their productions. That's all these tools are meant to do. That's what they're here for. Yeah. That's why we love experimenting with these things, is because each one offers a different outcome. The fact that these tools can, really help inform and kind of drive a direction and create a sound and create an environment, create a cohesive thing that feels night and day different from one tool to another. That's insane. Like, guys, I don't know if there's, like paintbrushes, right? Like it's a similar sort of thing. Like with a big broad paintbrush, you can do certain types of painting, but it'd be really hard to do some happy trees with a big broad brush, right? You kind of need a nice little soft brush to be able to do the trees a certain way. Like it's the same sort of parallel where like the tool does inform what you're able to create in the end. So getting accustomed to what each one has to offer is it's one of the most important things that you guys can do as you're growing your skill set and growing your we're gonna say it again, your database of what these sounds are like and when to pull what tool out for what reason.
Yeah, and importantly, that this is what the whole concept behind Luna is. Like Luna, we're attempting to make a music creation and production and mixing app where the sonics actually matter, where we're trying to help you make it sound better. So with the plugins, we all know how great the UAD plugins are, but now within Luna, with these extensions and summing, like we're trying to take it to the next level and just sort of weave together this thing where to recreate this sort of workflow where the studio you chose and what console it had and Ocean Way, what rooms that it had actually mattered, right? So I feel like that's like Luna just feels like it has a soul and it has a sonic soul, and we're trying to create this framework that you can get into and just and help you shape your sounds and stuff. Yeah.
Well, and speaking of channel strips that have a sound to them, the DFC. So what can you tell us about? So this is for people who don't know, this is AMS Neve. So this is kind of later on, post Rupert Neve.
Right.
And this was a DFC. Correct me if I'm wrong. Stands for a digital film console. Correct.
Yeah, yep. Correct. Yeah. So the idea with this was a console, prior to DAWs being able to do what, DAWs have really only been able to handle, huge amounts of, channel counts and IO and processing for relatively, recent, I guess, if you consider 10 years, 15 years, kind of recent. So, in the 90s or, in the late 90s, you had to have consoles that would have 1,000 audio pathways, right? Like that, and that's what apparently the DSP brains of this could handle that much, and you needed a full featured channel strip on every single channel. So that's what this is all about. The AMS Neve DFC channel strip. The idea is to just pack all of the basic control that you could possibly want on each and every channel, all of it there at your fingertips. So,
and this is out of all we've been slowly going through the whole collection of different channel strips available in UAD. I can say unequivocally, this one has the most bells and whistles.
For sure.
So this one, it's gonna we've been talking a lot about a lot of them. So far have been analog emulations, right? So like.
Yeah,
the Neve 1073, 1084 have got transformers and transistor. They've got a lot of circuitry going on. Same with the API, the SSL. Those are all based on analog circuits. This is distinctly digital. This is and what's really cool about the DFC plugin is it's based on the exact code that went into the console. So it's a one-to-one recreation of it. And when I say bells and whistles, I really mean it, guys. The flexibility, the shaping that you're allowed to do to the sound is unparalleled from any other plugin that we've explored so far.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And to
Drew,
do it very transparently, and to
It's
do
so
it very
transparent.
transparently, yeah,
right, and like
It's-
that's a great reason to pick this one up, pick this one out of the bunch, because as we just explored the differences that analog color can have, right? There's something to be said for having something that's fully transparent and not necessarily imparting a ton of color across all of your tracks. There's
Yeah.
lots of instances, lots of mixes where what actually sounds right is something that is just clean and transparent like this.
Yeah. So let's just dive right in. Like probably a good spot to start with this. The knobs over here on the left might be, a little bit intimidating, but let's just start with the process order here, right in the center, because this kind of tells this and the process in and out. This area of the plugin kind of tell the story about what you have available to you. So we have a 4-band EQ, parametric EQ. We have dedicated filters here. And then compressor, limiter, expander, gate, right? So it's sometimes you don't get all that, right? Sometimes you have to put the dynamics processor in either compress settings or limiter settings. Here we have it all separated out, including expansion and gating. And then and the idea here is that you can change the order of these. So if you can drag these around and move them into different places.
You can move any block in any spot, right?
Yeah. You can put anything you want anywhere. So that you've got the process order, basically a signal flow. Going from left to right. And then you also have this guy, which we'll talk about in a minute, but this is a dedicated EQ band that is specific for applying to the sidechain of any one of the dynamics processors that you would like. So you can do sidechain, you can filter the sidechain to make a de-esser, or you can filter the sidechain. So if you have this across a mix and you don't want the low end to pump, just like you would do with any other plugin, but you can also do it with the gate. Let's say you're gating a snare and you don't want the gate to open up when there's a lot of hi-hat bleed, then this band can be used to shave off that top end and keep the gate from opening, when you don't want it to, and so forth. Mm-hmm. So there's your process order. And then to the left of that, you basically have your the in and out buttons here and a master bypass. So that's a great place to start. So you can just sort of get a feel for it. The other two areas are a little bit more intimidating. We have an EQ. We have a basic EQ, which actually that's not very intimidating.
I'm so scared.
No. Yeah. That one you basically have what you would normally have, and you have with lots of cool the typical shortcuts you'd expect, being able to just click and drag a dot, and then click and pull up and down to adjust Q, right? And then if you right click, you can bypass the band, so you can and then single click or standard click turns it back on, so that way you can toggle on and off on a per band basis. So that's
super
easy.
really intuitive kind of graphical EQ. So of course, as you guys are seeing over on the left hand side too, as Drew's making changes on the EQ graph, it's bringing those changes over to the left. So you have two opportunities to dial it in, and it can be just kind of quick and easy. Like, hey, I want a bell curve here. Oh, I want a shelf over here. Like, being able to go in and do these. And again, this is going to be one of my favorite things about this plugin is the visual feedback that you're able to get on top. No, sorry, that's my second favorite. First favorite is definitely the process order. The fact that you can customize exactly how the signal flows through this plugin. As you guys have probably noticed, it's the only UAD plugin that we have that really allows that amount of customization for the signal flow inside the plugin. But having the graphic EQ, and then most importantly, once we get to the dynamics, that's really where having this graphic control can it goes into overdrive.
If you want to zero things out, you can command click on a given band, and it'll zero out the controls.
Oh, nice! It looks like it already zeroed on that one.
Yeah.
Try to show it on one of the other ones.
Oh yeah. So if we're over here, we can zero that one out. We can zero that one out, and we can zero out the high shelf. So the on buttons for each band allows you to zero them out independently.
We got a
nice.
quick question here that's
Sure.
fairly relevant. Jeffrey's asking, why can't we use the DFC as the unison input? Great question.
Yeah, I mean, Unison is all about the marriage between a hardware mic preamp and the software emulation, specifically with regards to the impedance matching between those two things, which has pretty significant tonal impacts because a preamp can load a mic and which in other words offer a certain amount of resistance, and depending on the amount of resistance that you load the mic down with, it will sound different, right? So if you want to hear this for yourself, take any mic and plug it into a unison preamp with a 1073, and then toggle the impedance switch from low to high, and the sound of that microphone will change pretty radically, pretty significantly.
Yeah.
So in this case, this is a console that's primarily focused on mixing, and it's a digital console, and so therefore, I honestly don't know whether or not these consoles had mic preamps. They probably had some sort of remote mic preamps.
I think
if
they
any,
were just
right?
weren't they just line it? Like I think these were primarily for the mixing stages.
Yeah.
So I believe there was no mic preamp. That correct me if I'm wrong, guys. If anyone's more of a DFC expert out there, I don't think they had mic pre's at all for this console.
Yeah. So, and regardless, even if they did, they would have, in keeping with the concept, the idea of a digital, the preamp is pristine and clean, and there's really none of this applies. In other words, half of unison is the impedance and the other half is the coloration that it's adding. So yeah, it just doesn't fit within the scope. And frankly, this was a ported over. This was a plugin that was programmed by AMS Neve, and it's a direct port from their signal, from their console to our platform.
Yeah, nice, man. So a bunch of people, we're gonna have some questions around the dynamic EQ part of it. We'll get to that as we get into the dynamics, but there's some more stuff with the EQ. So obviously clicking, dragging, as you guys are seeing over on the left-hand side, there's the multiple menus for being able to get in there, but there's also there's a high pass and a low pass filter.
So down here in the process selection, right? So in the process selection, this is where you choose what's going to come up on the knobs. So in the case of the EQ, I started by just grabbing here. But the idea here is that here's your 4 bands of EQ populated across the knobs with the ability to turn them on and off and adjust them. So that we kind of did when we showed off over here. But yeah, moving to the right, this is the filter area. And so over here we have filter number 1, which is, as you would expect, is what you would expect it to be, is a high pass, right? And so you can adjust the frequency just like you can in anything. You can also adjust the slope anywhere from some off or flat to 6 dB up through to 24. You also can change it between a high shelf and a low pass and a high pass here on the other end. So if you to create your typical band pass filter that we all know and love in lots of things, but you have the ability to turn those on and off and adjust them as needed.
Well, I mean, you actually just kind of hinted at if you're like me, the first question I had was like, why would I want 2 low pass filters? Why would I ever want 2 high pass filters? I was trying to, and the second I thought of it, I was like, oh, this allows you to do some really awesome shaping, right? So what you could do is you could set one, say you're not going to use a low pass, you only want high passes. What you could do is you could have one that's a very gentle high pass, and then you could set the second one to be a sharp high pass that's maybe a little bit lower. And so as you can see, they ultimately end up affecting one after the other, and you get represented there on the graph kind of the effect of having cascaded to the same filters, just with different filter curves to them. There it is. Yeah. So now you got like a gentle one going into a sharper one. So there are some creative ways to make use of that. And as you guys are going to notice, just the theme of this plugin is the customize. You can kind of make it do flexibility. You can make it do literally almost anything you want.
Yeah. So those are your 2 filters on that end, and then you have this is your dynamic EQ. So this is a filter that is not audible, right? This is not, unless you of course you can turn on the listen, and actually this is how you tune it, right? This is how you tune this the dynamic EQ band. So you turn it on listen, and then this allows you to listen to what you're doing, and you have all of the same controls that you would otherwise. So let's say you're trying to and maybe let's say you're trying to do make the mix not pump the compressor a bit. So you could do this, right? Basically sort of shaving off some of the bottom end and then applying this to the compressor. So now this EQ is in the side chain of the compressor, and it's going to quote unquote hide a little bit of the bottom end from you. You do not hear this. This does not take bottom end away from your mix, just like we've talked about with 88RS and all the others. But unlike other ones where you lose a band, this one they gave you a dedicated band. Yeah.
So yeah, there's a good question here. Dylan's asking, is there really a difference between a single band dynamic EQ and a movable sidechain filter? So yeah, Dylan, essentially what this is more of the latter. It's a movable sidechain filter. So it's informing the sidechain of one of your dynamics processors to, hey, like Drew set up now, you know what, don't listen to a little bit less low end so you don't pump so hard. And but likewise, you could say in a snare drum example, I would maybe really boost the main fundamental tone of the snare drum and then feed that into the gate. So the gate is only opening when it really gets the body of the snare drum activating that gate. Or you put it on a vocal, put it into the compressor mode, bring this up to and maybe make it a high shelf so it turns it into a de-esser so the compressor is overreacting to the high end sibilance that comes through the mic, and now the compressor it's getting a lot more energy, so it's like, oh yep, let me turn down a little bit more. So it is a dynamic. It's an EQ that's in the sidechain. Not to be confused with what a lot of us now know.
EQ,
A dynamic, exactly. This is not an EQ that is acting dynamically. This is a EQ that's feeding into a dynamics processor. So yeah, it's an important distinction there. Even on the UA platform, we do have the Oxford Dynamic EQ, which is what most of us all know as a dynamic EQ. It's an EQ that works dynamically, as opposed to this, which is a sidechain filter. That it's really cool that you can change the shape, you can change the amount, and then as Drew pointed out, you don't lose. On a bunch of the channel strips that we've covered, when you want to use the EQ as for your sidechain, you either lose a band or you sometimes lose the entire EQ. You end up dedicating that completely to being the sidechain filtering. So it's nice here to have a dedicated one for it for any of these types of tasks.
Yeah, cool. So I think go ahead, Matt. Sorry.
I was gonna say one cool little trick about this plugin. If you're not a fan of clicking and dragging the knobs, you can actually click on the text fields. Like if you click on the shape text field, and you can actually select it from a drop down menu below that.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, cool. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Sometimes there's this virtually turning knobs is a little bit of a hassle.
And shout out to those the textures on the knobs, right? That was one. You guys are pulling this up. You're probably you're seeing all the anti-aliasing on the triangles and stuff like that. Man, this is it preserved the classic look and feel of the DFC as well. That's which is with these kind of cryptic like these were the displays that you would see on the console. And if you guys if you ever want to see one of these, you can always, as always, check out the manual that's included with the plugin, and you guys will see some photos of an actual DFC console. And man, these things could get huge. Like some of the dubbing stages, those big stages, they'd have upwards of 100+ channels of this available to them. So yeah, it's really cool.
And even some nice touches, like for example, when you could be looking at the the compressor and you can see here that I'm not using all of my EQ bands. It's the button is half lit, letting me know that only 2 of my bands are in play, and the 2 are still available, when you're doing your bypasses and so forth.
Yeah, hopefully it's some comments here. People are like, I kind of agree. This plugin at face value kind of looks like it should be intimidating, right? It looks like a lot of things are going on, but hopefully you guys are picking this up of like, man, it's actually fairly intuitive. It's a lot of clicking and dragging. You can really approach it if you're familiar at all with using, say, like Logic EQ or the Ableton Live EQ, Oxford EQ, Cambridge EQ, any of these like digital EQs, a Fab filter. The workflow for this is eerily similar, except now you got a whole channel strip full of stuff here available in one place.
And ironically, this came before all of that,
I know, right?
For the most part. Yeah. These guys they were out in front, and it sounds really good. I mean, we're presenting this as a sleeper, but I can tell you that I've had multiple threads, in various places on the internet where like I've introduced people to this and sort of got them on it, and they've come back just going like, oh my God, where has this been? It's really intuitive. It's like, it's pure, it's digital, but it sounds good. And it like for certain uses, it's like, boy, it's cool. It's cool.
Nice. So we got EQ, we got filter. So now we're getting into the dynamics.
Yeah. So let's go into the dynamics. So we're going to come over here and we're going to hit the button that brings the dynamics processors, the parameters up onto the knobs. And then over here, we're going to be looking at our transfer curve, which if you're used to looking at these, you can see this one's a little bit different. And that's because this processor is unique in that it gives you compression and limiting and expansion and gating all at the same time. All, typically you're you're choosing either or, but in this case, as you'll see as we go through it, it allows you to do it all. So as you'd expect, you have your compression threshold right up here, which is moving the blue dot up and down a little bit. We've got a color coding, so you can always know where compression is. It's blue. Limiting is green. It's not engaged yet, so it's not there. And then expansion is purple, and gate is this gold color. And so you've got your ratio, just like you'd expect, which determines the slope or the intensity of the compression for signals above the threshold. Attack and release don't show on the curve because they're time based. But you've got your microseconds down to 70 microseconds, and then on up to whatever longer than you probably ever needed to be. And then
what is the maximum?
I don't
like
even know,
30. It's like 30.
Yeah.
50 was that 50 milliseconds?
I don't know. Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, 50 millisecond attack, and then the release is insane. The maximum release is 5 seconds.
5 seconds, yeah. So for music,
paralleled only by the I think the only thing I think that might be that in a release time is the Fairchild, right?
Fairchild, yeah. What was that, 25 seconds?
Yep.
Something crazy like that. So we've got all of your basic controls over here, and then in the second row we have the knee, right? And the knee is shown on the transfer curve as basically the gentleness of the transition between uncompressed and compressed. So and let me make the ratio more so we can really see that distinction happening here. But knee is a really great parameter for when you want to do a lot of heavy lifting with your compressor, but not have it be so noticeable. So for example, you'll notice that as I soften the knee, it actually begins compressing before the threshold. So when you soften the knee, the compressor starts to dig in a little bit easier. It starts to compress early. And that's a good thing because it will gently, as it passes the threshold, it will reach its, and in fact, that's what the knee is. The knee is how long across the input transfer curve will the compressor take to do its thing. And so obviously a hard knee means that you're going, as the signal comes up, crosses the threshold, you immediately go into your full compressed state. Not to be confused with attack time. Attack time is a phase. A lot of people think of attack as being a waiting period. It's not a waiting period. It's a time it takes to reach its fully compressed state. So attack time is different from knee in the sense that one is a phase in the process, and the knee influences the effect on the audio itself across the transfer curve. Hopefully that's making sense.
Well, it's also so helpful, right, to be able to just look over there and you can see the effect it's having instantly.
Yeah.
Which again is something very unique to this plugin in the UAD catalog, that you get to visualize this transfer curve for your dynamics. And the ratio, the knee. I think this makeup gain, does that also does that bring up and down the curve?
Well, makeup gain, you have two choices between if you're in manual makeup gain, then it will you can see its effect on by adjusting it, you can see its effect on the transfer curve. And then when it's in I guess it's both, but I think that the manual means you're in control of it and you have to adjust it. If it's in auto, then it'll do it for you.
Nice.
Yeah. So so this is very interesting. You can get a lot of interesting effects here. I got a super high ratio, but such a soft knee that I could really, you can compress things quite heavily and really sort of smooth out their dynamics while not being crazy audible. It's an interesting. It's super smooth.
I was like, this is just it's a transparent box, So this is one. I don't know if anyone could really describe what's the DFC sound. What's its signature sound? It's like it's not one of those.
The sound
boxes.
of math.
Yeah, exactly. It's the sound of nothing. It's just but in a good way, right? This is it can be very functional, and there's a reason why this was so integral for TV and film production. It's because it didn't impart a signature across everything. It really left it up to the mixers to be very specific about what's going on. And this is probably what Drew's about to hit on here is my absolute favorite part about using this plugin, which is the fact that you have a compressor and a limiter. So you can use both. You can kind of make a gentle compressor that's just overall, for say like a voiceover, or just for a vocal or a bass, or you can use this in musical sources. You can have a compressor that's kind of like your overall level. Maybe it's a little bit slower. And it's got a soft knee, so it's just kind of gently taming your dynamics. And then you can leave a limiter on there as well. So if all of a sudden there's a clap or there's a louder sound, you still get you get the energy of that, but having it limited in a very musical, very transparent way. You have the best of both worlds: soft compressor and then a limiter there at the top just to catch any really big peaks.
Similar to the 2254, right? If the Neve compressor, which obviously is modeled on the analog side, but yeah, that also has that similar arrangement. Has a dedicated limiter function and then also a separate compressor function. 33609 too, has it as well.
Yep. Nice. And so limiter, otherwise it's fairly similar, right? The controls are all about the same, except obviously you guys are noticing there's one control that's in the compressor, not in the limiter, and that's the ratio. Because this is just basically a brick wall limiter, right? This is like a 100 to 1, infinity to 1, just like you shall not pass over this level.
And as you can see, it's also kind of giving you it's like influencing the compressor. Like they're letting you know visually that, hey, even though you have a 3-to-1 ratio here, if you reach the threshold, if you reach the limiter threshold, you're still the limiter's gonna kick in. It's gonna
off with its head.
It's gonna off with its head. Exactly. Yeah. So there is, that's why that you're seeing that interaction here, because the limiter does sort of, circumvent the compressor when you reach that threshold. But prior to that, you could have a very gentle average leveling, as Ben mentioned.
Mm-hmm. And what's cool about this, so what we just explained, compressor and limiter, how they interact, how you can think about them, how you can put both of them to work. On the other side of the transfer curve is basically the same sort of arrangement where you have an expander, which you can think of as a downwards compressor, right? So this is similar to what the compressor was doing, where it's gonna take a ratio amount of how it's gonna eliminate, and then a gate as well. So you'll notice the graph will start looking fairly symmetrical here as Drew walks us through it.
Yeah. So one of the, so in a similar way with expansion is the way I like to explain expansion versus gating is, think of expansion as you turning the fader up and down, or the processor turning the fader up and down, whereas a gate is kind of like hitting the mute switch on and off. So gates generally turn things off, where downward expanders turn things down. So as your signal falls below the expander threshold, it'll follow the blue transfer curve and get turned down. And then as you come near the gate, you'll see that there's a similar reaction here, where so you drop below the purple dot and you're downwardly expanded until you reach the orange transfer curve, which is the gate, and it would be quote unquote turned down or turned off. Although that's a little bit not accurate, simply because you do have a depth control. So even though I'm describing gates as turning stuff off, it's entirely possible for off to only be 10 dB. You are in control. So unlike an expander, gates are basically they go straight to that level and are limited by their depth. Hopefully that's making sense.
Yeah, goes straight down, and you'll notice there's a hysteresis control here, similar to the 88 RS. So one more time again for me, because I 100% forgot how it works. So the threshold and hysteresis, how do those two work together to determine how the signal falls off?
Yeah, so the idea behind, most people are wanting to adjust their threshold so that so that you don't. Basically, hysteresis is a differential applied to the threshold for rising signals rather than falling. So what it allows you to do is it allows you to set your threshold high enough that the low level stuff won't open it. And therefore you won't get chatter on the gate. But it allows you to apply a differential to allow the transient to cause it to open.
Gotcha.
So it basically keeps you can set the threshold so that the decay is right, and then counteract that for the transient to let that come through. Hopefully that's making sense. So it's a differential applied to the rising signals as opposed to the falling signals.
Gotcha. And so as you're setting this up, right, if you're trying to dial in a gate to say work on a snare drum, would you leave the hysteresis at 0 to start with, dial in the threshold to get it working, and then adjust the hysteresis so it stops chattering?
Yeah, well, so what you do is you would adjust. I would put the hysteresis at 0 and then play with the threshold until you're getting rid of the stuff that you're absolutely getting rid of the low level stuff that you want, and then dial in a certain amount of hysteresis, and you'll be able to, as the hysteresis gets dialed in, then the transient you'll start to, as you open that up, the transient will start to be able to poke through that as you apply that differential. And so basically it learns that the threshold is for the low stuff and the differential that you add by the hysteresis is for the transients.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's, and then, one thing that is different, one thing that's different with the expander versus the gate is that you do have, expanders have knees as well. So you can soften the knee around that, the purple threshold or the expansion threshold. But gates don't have that. So for example, well, yeah, I mean, we'll make yeah. So, and then you can see that the purple, these guys are interacting with each other similar to the top. So, essentially what's happening here, if you want the anatomy of this, if you want to visualize this, imagine a sound coming in and it comes in and as it crosses each threshold, as it comes in, it's subject to the gate and then it rides that one up to the expander and it's riding this curve the entire time. So as your signal comes up, it's into the compression and limiting side, and then as it's falling, it will be subject to what the transfer curves in the gate or expander are telling it to do. So it's a crazy amount of control, like to be able to like shape the envelope of the sound throughout its entire basic like history across its dynamics.
Totally, and like I mean and this is especially to me, this is one of those plugins that if you know what you're trying to accomplish before you start messing with it, that's how you're going to get the best results, right? There's some plugins where, like for me, the SSL channel strip, right? Like I'll turn the compressor on and I'll quickly dial in. Oh, I want 2 to 1, 3 to 1, some threshold, boom, and I stop thinking about it. Like there's nowhere near the same level of detail of controls over it. Whereas with the DFC, this would inspire me to really think about what I'm sending into it and what I want to get back out of it, and then be like, cool, oh yeah, I'm gonna use the expander to like help me just kind of lessen how this falls off, and I need to put a gate in there because there's a little bit of background noise I want to eliminate. Cool. Yeah. I'm gonna use a compressor to like give me this gentle kind of ride to the level, and then I need the limiter because there's this one moment at the end of the chorus that she gets really, really loud and I just want to limit that. Perfect. All right, cool. Yep. I'm gonna use my this one, you're really going to want to kind of identify what you want to...
thinking man's plug-in, right?
It kind of feels like it is as intuitive as these controls are, and the fact that you can get in there and just kind of grab and go, it also kind of encourages you to really think about what it is you're using the compressor for, what it is you're using the limiter for, why are you putting these things in there, for what moments are they doing their job, as opposed to some of the more creative ones where it's really just kind of like, grab, oh yeah, I like what that's doing to the edge of the sound or what it's doing to the mid-range. This is not necessarily a creative shaper. This is much more of a functional and kind of a precise tool to get precisely what you want out of it. And it was cool too is I was messing with, as I've been learning this plugin to talk about here today. Just like you can do with the EQ curves, there some of the dynamics controls you can also go over to the transfer curve and grab and go. So you can dial in threshold. I think it's mainly just the thresholds of them. I'm not sure if there's a modifier to be able to change the ratios around, but it does let you get in there and get a little hands on with each of the dots.
Yeah, that's new. That's new to me. So yeah, I haven't messed with that myself. But yeah, because it's such the controls are nicely laid out and well labeled. So, but yeah, it's. Yeah, it is sort of I guess it's, hopefully it'll be a sleeper no more, right? Because this is definitely something you want to check out. And it is, I've come to love its GUI. It's like, it's super like utilitarian and I like it for some reason. I don't know. It speaks to me somehow,
Yeah. Well, there's one last page. There's the IO page. So it's kind of what you expect, right? Input level, output level. You've got phase
reversal,
as we
which actually
called it.
Polarity.
It's technically supposed to be called polarity, but since this is really intended for. It works both on stereo and mono. You guys are going to notice the phase and the width control. They're still present on the mono version of it, but they just don't do anything. Whereas when you have this on a stereo channel, that phase allows you to reverse A or B,
A,
left or
yeah.
right, or both.
Right. Or both.
And then this is to me a big discovery is this width knob. What is that doing?
Yeah, so this is pretty interesting. It basically is what most wideners do, right? It's taking well, first of all, you can go to the left and you can mono it, right? You can actually sum it down into a single mono thing, or on the widener side, it takes a percentage of the left channel and phase inverts it and puts it in the right, and vice versa, thereby basically like widening the sides by adding an out of phase version of the other side with it. So it's kind of like your classic widener. And again, as Ben mentioned, you got to be on a stereo track to do anything. But and be careful with it. Like all wideners, it's be gentle with it and use it to taste, I guess.
Yeah, so you can pull it all the way down to mono, or pull it all the way up to crazy out of phase.
All the way down to mono, or all the way up to wide, and that will be quite a
I'm pretty
play around
sure,
with that. But
I'm pretty sure it gets to like head spinning. Like, where is the sound? Like, why is everything behind me?
Yeah.
But it's great to have that sort of control, especially if you're imagine again, guys, they invented this console with film and TV in mind. Imagine being able to just like take some sound effects or like the stereo, so you have like some background ambience or something. Just left and right, it sounds fine, but by being able to add some width to it, you can kind of pull it outside the speakers, which is crazy helpful for if you want to create more focus for the dialogue or what's happening in the middle. You can leave those, you can, even mono those. If say you had a stereo source, you can mono up the vocals so they're perfectly down the middle, put your ambience a little bit outside the speakers with the width control. Like, it's stuff like this, you could apply it to drums. You could take the overheads of your drums. They're feeling a little bit narrow. Like say the mics, you did like a space pair and they're a little too close together. Using this width control, it simulates pulling those microphones a little bit outside the kit and kind of, overall giving you some more width to the sound stage.
Yeah.
And it's a very powerful control. It's hidden away in this I/O thing, but man, for me, this would be one of the main aspects of this plugin I would be using.
Yeah, effects returns too. Effects returns are really good. That's a good trick to widen something without messing with the integrity of the dry signal. So if you imagine having Ocean Way or any reverb on drums, and you want to add some width, you can put this on the effects return or your reverb returns and widen the reverb return while not really messing with you don't mess with the integrity of that stereo signal. That's good stuff.
Nice. And guys in the chat, I've been highlighting a bunch of you guys' comments as we've been going through this, but a lot of people are like, "Oh wow, this is it's a bit of an eye opener," and there's some really cool things about it that you guys have noticed. If you guys have if there's any questions before we wrap up today, hit us up in the chat. There's a good one here. Mikhail is asking, what about surround functionalities? There's a DFC, obviously, Luna's a stereo only DAW at the moment, but in say in Pro Tools or Logic or other 5.1 or surround capable platforms, how does the DFC work in those surround instances?
Yeah, you might have noticed, speakers behind me, my control room is set up for surround. And, while we don't have any pure surround plugins, they work great in Pro Tools as multi-mono plugins. So in Pro Tools, and I'm assuming, I don't know about other DAWs, but, because I'm primarily a Pro Tools guy other than Luna. So you can use them as multi-mono instantiations of them, which allows you to either link all of the controls, or you can link the controls, get all your basic setup done, and then unlink the controls to have finer, more granular control over individual channels within your, the surround spread there. But yes, it works great in that way. All of our plugins are that way.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and that really, what that really comes down to is how you're setting up your 5.1 mixes, right? So if you're using, say you have a stereo source coming in and you're obviously mixing it into a 5.1 setup, then you would be using the stereo version of this plugin on your stereo track, and then doing the processing, and then having the mixer engine telling it where to go in the sound field. And then, as Drew mentioned, like if you say you have a bus or an ambisonic track with multiple channels, or your output, if you're going to use this, this is a great tool to use on the output of a 5.1 mix. Then you would use the multi-mono version of the plugin. So the only real limitation there would be this width control. I think would be one of the only things that really wouldn't operate how you'd expect it to, since they're all in mono.
Correct,
but you would do a 5.1 width. I don't know how that would actually. There's no left right sides to pull out at that point.
At that point, you would just, you could just use, you could just place them. You could do no phantom center or phantom center. There'd be other ways to address that in that scenario.
Yeah, but yeah, for using it for the compressor, limiter, filtering, final stage EQ. Yeah, this is, and again, because it's so transparent and it's so powerful, this would work great on the output stage of a 5.1 mix as well. Yeah, I see. EO S&J is saying that the DFC sits on his 2-bus. So yeah, man, Drew, this has been a really, really cool walkthrough, man. And cool to kind of discover. This is one of those ones that I personally don't, haven't really touched a lot, but by kind of learning about it for the, to be able to help talk about it here today for the show, I've learned, I built it. It's been added to my database in the back of my mind now. It's like, there's this DFC that, like, when I need a very transparent, when I need a very practical tool that's got a lot of power to it, I'm going to be coming back to this one now.
Yeah. It's I mean, that's what, I felt that way about the Avalon last week, where I rediscovered it myself. The others I use, there's plugins we all use on a day-to-day basis and we're intimately familiar with them. But like, that's what I think is beautiful about these deep dives, that, like, I hope that's what we're doing every week, is just to kind of opening people's eyes, and you can never, I know this is controversial, but you can never have too many plugins. You can never have, like, when
you work for a plugin company, Drew, of course you would say that.
But still, I mean, but hey, man, I've been a user since 2011, and every time UAD put out something, every time Universal Audio put out something new, I was just like, oh yeah, like, how does this add to my toolkit? So yeah.
Same
yes,
way.
the world needs another compressor.
Exactly. They all have something different to offer.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, man, guys, this has been a super fun show. It's been really great to kind of talk about the classic, studio console workflow and how that influences productions and mixes, and being able to hear the kind of the proof in the pudding there of the difference, all going all API or all Neve or all SSL. And as I hope you guys are all walking away from the show, downloading some sessions, pulling up some of your old sessions, and trying the same experiment, and really starting to learn plugins that you may be a little bit less familiar with, like the DFC or like the Voxbox or the Avalon. Take a new tool, take your time to learn it. Don't try to do 5 of these all at once, right? This is a pro tip. Do one at a time. Really try to understand it. Use it on all your mixes, kind of overdose on a plugin for a little while, and then add another one to your arsenal, and over time these just kind of build up, and that knowledge and that experience cements itself in your mind, and you can be in the middle of a session, you can be in the heat of the moment and know exactly when to pull out what tool, and that's what people pay us for. That's why people will hire you, and why your clients will return, is because they know you're the expert at getting great sounds. And I hope you guys are walking away from these shows inspired to go out and try this stuff for yourself.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Absolutely.
Always remember that. Yeah.
Always remember that. And so, guys, with that, it's a really fun week. This is going to be a great week. We'll be back here tomorrow, starting 1 hour later. So we'll be starting at noon Pacific with Carlos de la Garza mixing a Cold War Kids song inside a Luna. And you're going to be able to download the Luna session for that. We got some new products arriving tomorrow as well. And then Wednesday at noon, we're in with Jakir King and Moon Taxi. So if you guys aren't already, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And if you want your phone to buzz every single time we go live, you just had to hit the notifications button, and then you'll get push notifications when we go live for all these shows. As always, hit us up in the comments. You can also find over on UAD forums. There's always help and support in the community around office hours, around the UAD forums. It's even over on even over in the Facebook groups for UAD. You'll find just a lot of really awesome. A lot of awesome folks willing to share their knowledge and their experience. So if you guys ever have questions, feel free to hit us up. And if you got great music you want us to share, hit us up live at uaudio.com. Send us an email with some music that we can feature in the opening countdowns. # Universal Audio on Instagram or Facebook. We'll find your photos. And I think with that, guys, that's the show. This is happy Monday, everybody, and I hope to see everybody back here again tomorrow for our announcement show. I'm so pumped to be able to share what we got cooking up with you guys for tomorrow.
That's gonna be great.
Nice, Awesome, guys. Well, have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you back here tomorrow. Peace.
See you guys.
Peace.